Thank you very much. Okay. I'll start by saying that 20 to 30 years ago, the hybrid industry, or the solar hybrid industry, was like a bunch of old dreadlocked guys with tie-dyed shirts living in the back of the bush. And it's really encouraging seeing how far we've come. Today we have real projects going ahead on mine sites. It's a real industry, and the smart and motivated people that I see in front of me here is very encouraging for the prospects in the future. So thank you to everyone. My presentation is on the DeGrussa Solar Hybrid project. I was involved from the beginning of development really through to the O&M, so have been involved in all aspects of the project, and looking forward to giving everyone here some insights into the challenges that we saw on the project and also the real benefits that we saw in the end. So a bit of background on Dewey, or UV, as you might know us. We're a solar and wind EPC contractor, also work in the development space as well on projects, depending on the industry, depending on the market. And we've completed around 3,500 megawatts of projects worldwide, and currently have offices in about 20 countries on most of the continents. And we also have an off-grid team, and had that from about 2005. So we really have a team that's dedicated to hybrid projects. And at the moment, most of that team is in Australia, having completed the Sandfire project. So we look to really leverage on that knowledge and experience to continue developing projects in Australia and also internationally. There's a few markets from Indonesia, Africa, in the Americas where hybrid projects really make sense. So background on the mine, it's primarily a copper mine with some gold resource in there as well. It started out its life as an open cut mine, and a couple of years ago it started its underground operations, and to bring the ore up out of the ground, put it into its processing facility, which it has on site, and ship out, I think it's 30% concentrate to its clients around the world. It is a high-grade producer, and it is in the lower cost quartile of production. So it is quite a profitable mine and quite a good mine to work with on a project that you could say is a stranded asset if the company goes out of business. So that was one of the key reasons for, let's say, choosing Sandfire to have this project on their site. At Sandfire, their electricity supply comes from a 19 megawatt diesel power station. It is quite remote. The site is 900 kilometres northeast of Perth, you could say, and so it does not have a grid around it at all. I think that its nearest township is 150 kilometres away, so it is quite remote. And like I said, the power station is 19 megawatts. The site load is currently sitting between 11, 12, 13 megawatts, which is constant 24/7 as the processing facility runs, as the underground vent fans, pumps runs throughout the night. So we see the solar contribution is only during the day at the moment, but we'll see with battery storage technologies continuing that may change in the future. So the solution to Sandfire's problem of having their site run on diesel, with having high diesel prices, the fluctuating diesel price, which is quite a risk to them. You don't know what the Saudis are going to do next. That they wanted a solution to basically reduce cost and basically reduce their risk, have a bit of a hedge on their electricity generation at their site. So we approached Sandfire back in 2012 with a solution for their problem, and at that point of time, the optimum solution that we saw was a solar hybrid project. So what was proposed and what ended up being installed was a 10.6 megawatt solar farm, single axis tracker. so east-west tracker, with 10 megawatts of AC capacity. And so that was primarily to reduce the diesel consumption of the site, but basically to allow that solar farm to be installed to keep the grid stability, to ensure that the reliability of the electricity generation could remain. We had to install a battery facility as well. So there's 4 megawatt battery station, 1.8 megawatt hours of storage, with a 6 megawatt peak capacity. So that was really not used for load shifting at all, primarily to, I'll go through it in a bit more detail later, but basically to cover spinning reserve, ramp rate control, and a couple other auxiliary services. This project is definitely a world first, so it is challenging, it was challenging, and I'd be lying if I said that everything went smoothly, so I'll try and go through some challenges later on. But the satisfaction in the end on these projects, on hybrid projects, or any challenging project in particular, the satisfactions are high at the end of it. So for me, it was worth it. So just running through the penetration levels, you could say, is the term that we use in the hybrid industry. You probably all know it. But basically, from our perspective, there's 3 different levels of penetration. You have low penetration, which basically if you had a 50 megawatt load, you put a couple megawatts of PV in there, you basically don't need a control system at all to run that reliably. It's basically a grid. So I'd class that as low penetration, as a simple control mechanism that you'd put in there, but not much in particular. Moving up to medium penetration, you need more complex controller. Don't so much need storage at this stage, and it does increase the solar fraction, or the energy that you can contribute significantly, pushing up that penetration level just with a decent controller in there. The next level, moving up to high penetration, is a lot of PV or a lot of renewable energy. You need a complex control system, and you also need a significant amount of battery storage, depending on what the services you want to provide at the site. The Sandfire project, or the DeGrussa project, is probably somewhere in between medium and high penetration. The site load is currently around 12 megawatts, and our instantaneous contribution could fluctuate between obviously 0 megawatts and up to 9 megawatts, you could say. Excuse me, you could say. So, the solar penetration is roughly 80%, or could be higher in some circumstances if the site load comes down. But that's, from my perspective, probably one of a world first in the industry, especially with being on a mine site, being connected to its main load, its processing facility. Because if you're running a house or residential site on hybrid electricity, you can have some downtime. You don't like it, but it's okay. If you're on a mine site, on a processing facility, a mine's risk profile or risk requirements increase substantially, and you need to control those risks with technical solutions, with whatever way you can through your legal contracts. But yeah, at the end of the day, the technical solutions is what alleviates the risk in these situations. Okay, so just a bit of background on the components. We used 34,080 310 watt polycrystalline modules, distributed DC combiner boxes, and 5 2 megawatt containerized inverter stations. So the solar portion is fairly standard from the industry's perspective. It's been done before. It's nothing special. It was in a remote site, which made it a bit more difficult, but that's been done before for sure. The battery station had two megawatt grid forming inverters, which are quite a good technology from ABB, with 3 megawatt peak each, which made up the 6 megawatts total. Connected to that was the 1.8 megawatt hours of storage, lithium-ion battery technology. So that the battery station in itself, yes, it was quite new technology, and to that size on a mine site hadn't been done before. But once again, the technology had been done before to some extent. Now the trick with this project, or the challenging part, was actually the controller, the control system, and that integration with the diesel power station at this level, and with the risks that we had to mitigate. But the method that we went with, ABB provided the controller as well. It was a distributed system, so on each of the inverter stations, battery inverters, solar inverters, and also at the main controller of the diesel power station, we had a M+ controller. Now, the benefit of that system was that if one of those controllers failed, the whole system didn't fall over. It's not a single, the solar control system is not a central controller that if it fails, the whole system won't work. To us, that wasn't a good solution, but these distributed controllers worked really well. And that also allows for remote monitoring and control through the ABB software, but we also had our own SCADA system that we developed for the whole project, which is quite valuable, not only for us, but also the mine site. They now have a massive screen in their control room that they can look at their power station, look at trends if they want to, and from their perspective, they can see a lot more data and have a lot more value in looking at our SCADA system, because it also has the power of each of the generators, frequency, power factor, so they can really look at how their mine's operating and understand where they can improve. The functionalities of the control system, its key functionalities, I could say, is spinning reserve control, solar smoothing, so ramp rate control, frequency control, reactive power control, and priority dispatch of the solar PV. So there's a few main purposes of the controller in there, but the key reason for it is to make sure that the diesel power station is not affected, or has minimal effect from the solar PV. Nighttime operation of the system. Obviously, solar doesn't run. Also, the battery storage is not there for load shifting, so basically, we're not covering any energy requirements at night, but we can provide frequency support and reactive power support. So there is significant benefits that you can see from that. It reduces costs for the mine site, even though it's an auxiliary function of our system. It does create value. And the other benefit you can see is spinning reserve. That the additional spinning reserve of the battery station at night can reduce costs of the mine or the diesel power station owner, because you can basically turn off diesel gensets. Daytime operation, so a lot more interesting. At daytime, at the moment, the mine site is still reliant primarily on the diesel power station. If you look at the graph, there still has to always be, at this stage, the diesel power station running. Possibly in the future, during down days, we'll look into diesel off mode, you could say. It is in our contracts to investigate that and see if we can do it. It does increase the risk significantly for the mine, with minimal savings, you could say, compared to where they can get elsewhere. But it is something we're looking into, and we want to sort of really push forward with, because it is something that could assist the industry, basically proving diesel off mode on a mine site. So we'll look into that. But anyway, the solar PV generation we want to maximise that during the daytime operations. So through the control system, through the battery storage, the reason why that was all put in is to maximise the PV production. But we do have key constraints in the system. The two main ones, the constraints from the diesel power station, is the minimum diesel loading, the minimum number of diesel generators online, and the required spinning reserve from the from the diesel power station or the battery storage system. At this stage, the spinning reserve requirement when the solar is running is 100% coverage of the solar PV output, plus an additional buffer that's outlined by Sandfire. Now that 100% is basically to cover if there was a full trip of the solar feeder, which is unlikely. So as an example, if we have 8 megawatts of PV production, then 6 megawatts of the battery storage would cover 6 megawatts of that, and then we'd need an additional 2 megawatts of spinning reserve from the power station. So we obviously want to bring that 100% coverage ratio down, because then we don't need as much spinning reserve from the power station. The ramp rate of the solar and battery station effect on the power station is also determined by the mine and the diesel power station owner. And at the moment, we have a figure of 8.3 kilowatts per second. So if you look at the power station and how that looks at the renewable energy portion of the power supply, all they want to see is, they can see fluctuations, but just as long as it's not more than 8.3 kilowatts per second up or down. So fairly straightforward there. And as I said before, diesel off mode is possible, but we'll see if that happens in the future. If you look at the corporate structure of the project, this is what it was like before we came along. So it's nice and simple. We have Sandfire as the off-taker of electricity and a third-party diesel power station owner. That's KPS in this case. We came along and developed the project and signed a PPA with Sandfire. So we developed a special purpose vehicle for this project and signed that PPA with them. From there, we brought in I must say, there was an option for Sandfire to directly purchase the system from Dewey, but in the end, as we've heard in the last day, that mines, Sandfire in particular, want to focus on their core business and want to put money into their core business, not a side project that is just going to save them money. Because generally what you see if you put, $1 million into a project on a mine site in improving efficiency or improving your processes, you'll get a massive return from it, as opposed to renewable energy when you compared with that you'll get a meagre return, you could say. But it does have other advantages as well. So from after the PPA was signed, the financiers were brought in. So there was 3 different types of finance that were brought in on this project. Grant funding from ARENA, so thank you very much, ARENA. Although I must say that after 6 years, the grant fund from ARENA will be paid back. So the PPA term is 6 years with extension options. And I can say that if we were able to get a PPA of 10 years, we wouldn't have needed any grant funding at all. So basically ARENA came in to cover that back end of the PPA. So after 6 years, that'll be paid back. So it's like an interest-free loan, really. Other than ARENA, we had equity funding, which came in, and Newen, the company that provided that, they will be the ones, or they are the ones that own the project now. And they also brought in debt funding. So it's a fairly complicated financial structure with all the legal contracts that were required and the hoops we had to jump through, you could say, with such a technical project. With a project that you're mitigating risk through technical solutions, you need to be able to communicate these technical solutions to financiers and business people, you could say, and that's difficult sometimes. So my suggestion would be try and minimise the number of financiers. If you can, although ARENA or government funding is required for some projects, if you can get away with it at all, I would suggest not using it, but sometimes you need to. And if you can simplify the other funding that comes in with a minimal number of interfaces, that definitely makes it easier. And of course, from Dewey's perspective, we developed the project and on a basis of signing the funding agreement with the equity provider, we signed a EPC contract and an O&M contract for the life of the project. So that's the corporate development structure. I'll just go down to the communication structure, which might show you the difficulties we had with communicating the different technical solutions to different parties throughout the project. So an interesting one was we were talking to the diesel generator IPP, or the diesel power station owner, and they were a client's client. So it's the making sure you can develop a good technical solution while maintaining commercial requirements of each of the companies was quite a challenge with this project. In terms of timeline, as I said before, the first call to Sandfire was in late 2012. We signed an MOU with them in late 2013. The grant funding agreement with ARENA was signed in mid-14, which really kick-started the project to ensure that the commercials stacked up. So if we didn't have that, then the project wouldn't have gone ahead. The PPA was signed in early 2015, so around February. EPC contract and construction start in July 2015. Construction completion in March 2016, and then practical completion in June 2016. So basically we took a complex project and said, all right, let's do it in a really short period of time, which another thing I wouldn't suggest. try your hardest to push out that construction time or the development time to give you enough chance with unknowns that might pop up during the project, because being such complex projects, things will come up. So the result, this is a top view of the mine. So basically you have the power station down here and the solar PV farm there, which is connected via 11 kV cable, and the battery station is on a separate feeder and it sits just next to the power station there. An overview of the mine while we're here. We have the tailings dam, which is where they put all their rubbish at the end, which still has gold in it, you could say, so they might go through that at some stage. The open pit, which they were mining up until 2013, I think, before they went underground. So here's the underground ramp there. The processing facility is obviously as close to the power station as they can be, and that's where they basically take the ore, crush it up, make the concentrate, and ship it out on trucks. Just some pretty pictures of the solar farm and the inverter stations. Seen it all before. The battery station, so that consisted of two 40-foot containers of batteries, which on the either end, the battery inverters from ABB, and the transformer in the middle. Now, this is a trend page from a day back in May, which explains a lot about what the system does, and this is it was pretty exciting when we were able to get the system running and actually see how the whole system integrated together and worked to have a good solution and didn't affect the mine at all. So I'll explain in a bit of detail. So basically you have the green trend, which is the solar PV output, the maroon trend, which is the irradiance from paranometers. The black trend is the site load. There's a bit of an error there, but don't mind that. So black is the site load, and the maroon is the diesel generator load. So as you can see, the solar PV ramps up in the morning from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. It's almost at full capacity. That's a function of the single axis tracker, and it follows the trend of the pyranometer as well. You can see through times here there's a bit of interference where the solar capacity has reduced. That's actually the curtailing function of the PV farm to protect the diesel power station. So because of fluctuations with the diesel power station, for some reason there needed to be a small amount of curtailment. At this stage, we didn't have the full battery station on, so if we did, then this wouldn't have occurred at all. If we move over to the afternoon, there's obviously some cloud cover coming over. You can see that these cloud events here where the irradiance drops and also the PV output drops. But interesting part is this right here, where the PV output dropped from, I think it was roughly 6 megawatts or close to 7 megawatts, and it dropped to 3.5 megawatts. And you can see the battery station output in the grey trend down here. So as the solar PV came down, the grey trend shot up. And the next page is just a zoomed in version of that event right there. So, how am I going? Okay, no worries. Cool, I'll just cover this. So basically, this proves the system works, where we have the solar PV output dropping down to 3.5 megawatts, the battery station ramping up, and the diesel power station output staying steady or increasing a little bit. So that really proved that the system works. So that was encouraging to see. I'll just be able to, I just got to wrap up here, I'm going over time. But a few of the challenges that we had with the project were basically mostly around risk and risk allocation. So one of the main things, ensuring that we could give Sandfire the cost savings that they wanted. The main constraint with that is the mine life, so the PPA length. A challenge is the non-core business drain on Sandfire's time and money, you could say. That's something that they struggled with. And also, another thing was having a high penetration project. The technical challenges were quite intense at some stages. So we did have events where, during operation, where the system, or through maintenance of the diesel power station that occurred, the whole site blacked out. So, and that was a auxiliary cause from the control system of the PV farm. So it does occur. I'm not saying that the site's squeaky clean and there is teething or efficiencies that we can have on the project, but yeah, that's the fun of hybrid projects, I suppose. What else can I go through? The other financing risk, the major thing, is the potential for a stranded asset. So with the mine being so remote, there and no other connection points around it, basically if the mine went out of business, then the financier would have a stranded asset. So being able to allocate the risk in that situation was quite difficult and something that you need to come up with a solution for. Yep. Okay, so that's about it. If you have any more questions or if you want me to go through some more technical details with you, I can run through them with you after. Thank you very much for your time.